just muting a couple of people here. There we go, because I can do it for them. Just make sure. Yeah. Great. I think we have two more, but we can start anytime you like, Clay, I think, because we're at 7:03.
Thank you, Natasha, in the sound booth. Wonderful. Let's start the evening, shall we? Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome from the snow globe streets of Nelson and the mystic backroads of the South Slocan. I'm Clay McCann, and it's my pleasure to join you tonight in welcoming Hannah Calder and Michael V. Smith to Oxygen's Author Reading Series. Tonight's permutation of the Author Reading Series is supported by the Columbia Kootenay Cultural Alliance and is co-presented by Elephant Mountain Literary Festival. A warm thank you to everyone who has donated to this and other cultural programming at Oxygen. Oxygen, located at 320 Vernon Street, the back alley entrance, is an artist-run center in Nelson that nurtures contemporary professional practices while engaging the wider community through multidisciplinary programming. The focus tonight is on writers from BC's Okanagan Valley for the second Zoom reading event of the 2021 Author Reader Series. Tonight's event features readings from and discussions with Vernon fiction writer and poet Hannah Calder, as well as Kelowna writer, performer, and filmmaker Michael V. Smith. I have had the immense pleasure of hosting these two writers in the past. In July 2016, Calder and Smith appeared in the Okanagan Regional Library UBC Okanagan Visiting Author Series, an unorthodox affair during which the manic energies of the zeitgeist burst forth in explosive apostasy, smashing one of the event's lights, nearly killing me in the process. These two writers had unleashed something amaze craze on the unwitting Okanagan. I'm gravely concerned for all our safety, but we'll push on as I've promises to keep. A short film featuring Calder and Smith is available on Oxygen's website. Forthcoming author readings in the 2021 cycle include memoirists Kate Braid from Victoria and Vera Maloff from the West Kootenays Shore Acres on February 24th. And UBC Okanagan author Matt Rader, along with students from Selkirk College's Creative Writing Initiative on March 24th. Alongside the virtual events, the Author Reading Series presents W. Mark Giles' Making Light, Pandemic Winter, a digital presentation of daily haiku poems available on Oxygen's website and social media channels. We turn first to Hannah Calder. Calder has published two novels, most recently Piranesi's Figures in 2016 and Morehouse, both titles from New Star Books. She has also published poetry and short fiction in various literary periodicals. Born and raised in Great Britain, Hannah now teaches English and writing for Okanagan College. Michael Turner notes of her work, reading Calder is to move through the world barefoot over asphalt, grass, sand, and water. This is sensual, insightful writing. Feel free to unmute and applaud, and please join me in welcoming to the stage Hannah Calder.
Thank you, Clay. It was a wonderful introduction. Very funny. And I do want to thank you and Julia and Natasha for organizing this, and Tom Wayman as well. So thank you, all of you. It's really nice to meet you and to see you again. I'd also like to thank the Columbia Kootenay Cultural Alliance that you just mentioned, Clay, for organizing this event and I guess funding this event as well. And all of you for being here tonight. It's really lovely to be able to meet with people, even in this Zoom space. It's lovely. And a special thanks to those people who've made donations towards this series through Canada Helps. And I also want to thank Curtis, MD, and Somara, MD. They're the filmmakers that I'm working with on the film Why We Write. And Michael and I did some filming for that with Somara. And it was, when I was talking to Tom Wayman about this event, I was thinking it'd be nice to have that video be available. And so Mara and Curtis very quickly pulled something together, and some of you've already seen it. I know it's on the Oxygen website, so please take a look at that. Yeah, and I think that's it. Oh, and I'd like to thank Carrie Gilbert, who she's here in the audience, and she's agreed to help me with part of the reading tonight. I wear glasses, my glasses, and I can see the screen is a little bit fuzzy from where I'm sitting, but if I wear my glasses and try and read at the same time, it's not fun. So I'm going to keep my glasses off, and then when I talk to you guys later on, I'll put them back on, and when I watch Michael, I'll put them back on. Okay, so I'm going to start the reading by reading a short excerpt from Piranesi's Figures, which, as Clay mentioned, came out in 2016. And then I'm going to read some short stories, very, very short stories, and the rest will be poetry. And yeah, I'm just going to start with this excerpt. And I've chosen this one because it just, this is based on, this particular part of the book is based on a true story. And it's a true story that to this day, I still can't believe. So my grandfather, who's a character in this book, very loosely based on him, but he told me this story, and the story, well, you need to know the whole part of the story, but so he was married to my grandmother, and he said that he came home one day and he found my grandmother in bed with his adopted brother. And he left. So he left the family, and they were my dad and my aunt were raised by their mother, who's also a character in this book. And he remarried, and then later on, like years and years later, he met a woman, and he didn't know her very well. He just, very, very, like, didn't know her at all, really, but they met, and this is his story, right? And she asked him to, she wanted to have a baby, and she asked him to impregnate her. And it still blows my mind that this ever happened. And I just have my grandfather's words on this. So I just had to put it into this book. And this is my sort of rendition of that story. Okay. Long after his marriage to Violet, according to the cassette tape whirring in the machine, Bill develops a strange, uncensored love for a woman who works the scarves and handbags counter at Selfridges. They meet in the usual way, over a wife's birthday gift. The colors of the scarf worry Bill, but he takes the woman's word for it that they are both chic and modern. At this point, the woman gets given a name, Hilda, and a story of her own. Husband lost to adultery, ticking maternal clock, red hair, large breasts. In the end, Bill only needs the time between one tea and scone meeting on the 4th floor and the next to make his decision. Of course, love, of course I'll do it. They meet at her flat the following Thursday night. Hilda is crying when she opens the door. She has been crying on and off all afternoon. The dismal weather does nothing to lessen her sadness. This is not the way it is meant to happen. What if it doesn't take? How will she raise a child all by herself? What will her family say? Bill is all hush hush, one hand reaching under her skirt, the other stroking her little girl hair. In theory, over 2 lumps please tea, the act seems sweet to him, a duty that any good man would honor without hesitation. But here and now, standing by an almost bare coat rack, rain slashing the frosted glass of the front door, he sees that it is only about sex. It takes just the one meeting to impregnate her. Bill waits for her to call him, to have a second go, but she never does. He returns to her flat, hoping to bump into her on her way home from work. After 3 tries, he gives up. One Saturday afternoon, he goes to her work and hovers around outside, watching her stroke silk cornflowers over the cheek of a businessman. Months later, he sees her in the street, her blue coat, her bump, her headscarf bought at half price, cigarette smoke leaking from her nostrils. Eventually, as the memory of his encounter with Hilda begins to lose its sharp edges, he reverts back to believing that his actions had been nothing but noble all along. Noble sweetness in the whispered corners of her hair. Fatherless, the baby boy lives at the mercy of his mother's depressions and fits of rage that stem from having to stuff emotions for the scarf and handbag buying public. He grows up to be a pathetic man, locked forever in a Piranesi etching, pitted by art students and gallery visitors alike. A few years pass and Bill decides to send a check for £50 to the department store. Not knowing her surname, he addresses it to Hilda, the scarves and handbags lady. It is returned to him a week later with a note. Mrs. German's surname no longer works for Selfridges. We regret to inform you that she left no forwarding address. Bill rips the note up into as many tiny pieces as his TV drama producer will allow, then kicking the leg of the sofa until he is crying heavy onto the carpet, he realizes that he has lost all his children without a fight. Okay, I'm staring at myself. Fun. All right, this second story is part of a collection of short stories that I wrote a few years ago called Those Lights of Zoology. And Those Lights of Zoology is a line from Moby Dick, and he's referring to whales as those lights of zoology. I just think it's such a fantastic phrase. Anyway, that's the title of this collection. And this story in particular, so all of the stories in the collection, and a lot of this worked its way into the book Pyrenees and Stiggers as well, but all of the characters are artists from this book. It's called Beyond Reason, Art and Psychosis. And this particular story is based on Johan Knopf's work, and he draws a lot of crows and a lot of circles in his imagery as well. And there's a little bit of information about each artist in the book, and so, you know, his occupation was that he was a locksmith, and the title of this piece is called, it's a very strange title, The Marvels, the Lead Shot to the Sporting Gun. It's very strangely worded, but these little details, the details from the images, details of the life of the person, of the titles of their work, were what I used to create these stories. And so this story is based on his work. And it's titled Crow Circles. The bread rolls are still warm. Herr Sherman takes 1 dozen. I whip the paper bag once around to seal them in, little treats for his children's soft tongues. Johann, he calls to me where I am, hiding in the tall grass, a giant. Pick up those birds. I run like a hunting dog into the clearing, spraying a tree with my sex, gathering the soft dead bird in my mouth. No teeth, remember. This is my master's prize. The other bird I pick up and place gently at the bottom of my Hessian sack. I think about the soft circles of bread he will give me afterwards, the cup of warm beer. When I left my mother's bakery, I was only 18. I moved to the city. It was there that my friends persuaded me to marry Greta. She was too pretty for me, but I had good hands, good fingers. I picked her locks just right, she said. That was funny once, maybe twice. Then she started seeing my friends in the daytime, so I beat her right there outside the shop. Johann, he said, passing back the sack of game, pluck them. Here? Why not? I begin plucking like there is no tomorrow. My tongue starts to slobber so that it slides out of my mouth, dripping a string of drool right onto the pheasant's bumped back. I pull myself together, whimper a quiet tune that the master recognizes. He hums along like we are old friends out on a lark. I think about the bread and beer soon to be swelling in my stomach in yeasty splendor. The bakery was always warm, often too warm. I would itch my nose with the back of my doughy hands, use my wrist to slide the jar of baking soda along the work slab. I had a dusted old man look about me. My mother's kitchen was full of stale bread, bags of broken strudel slices, biscuits we had to eat with one hand under the chin. I was sick of baked goods by the time I left home. Christ hardly knows these dead birds circling. He hardly feels the cross, spiteful jab of their beaks in his skin and eyes. They will rise again. Those are not maggots stirring their bodies alive. That is breath returning, as it does at a resurrection. I open the Hessian sack, and Greta comes nervously out onto the grass, her face the blue-green of underwater, the same yellow of the plucked pheasant's thighs, circling the bruises I have given her. Okay, now I'm going to read something with help from Carrie Gilbert. So Natasha is going to give Carrie permission to put her camera, her mic on. Hi, Carrie.
Hey, everyone.
So I called Carrie like 2 hours ago. I was going to read this by myself, but it's dialogue, and I thought this is going to sound really silly. So it's a story from another collection I'm working on called Fix, and I've chosen this because it's short and most of them are quite long. Although Carrie said to me, well, you could just read a part of a story. You don't have to read the whole thing. And I hadn't really even thought about that because I thought we got to read the whole thing. So anyway, this is short, and Carrie is kindly going to help me read it. So thank you. Okay. It's called Friends Forever. Two women stand in the entranceway of an ostentatious monster of a home. Real estate agents hover, letting little beeps of joy ping from their phones. Couples move from room to room, oohing and ahhing over their house's various features. If you listen closely and ignore the agents and their swishing jackets and the couples and their talking mouths, if you aren't too blinded by everybody's recently polished shoes and sparkling watches, you can just about focus on what the women are saying to each other. Listen.
Wasn't this supposed to be your forever home?
Not quite. We've done reno so we can make it someone else's forever home.
But then where will your forever home be?
We're not sure. Somewhere untouched by global warming, above rising sea levels, not too close to the edge of a forest.
A deep, dark one, or a woodland glade, toadstool circle one?
Both. Both are susceptible to fire.
And what about the flooding?
We'd avoid that too. Rain barrels everywhere, sandbags at the ready, away from any rising rivers.
Locusts?
Close the windows.
A plague of frogs?
Not sure, close the windows?
All that croaking, all those tadpoles crisping in the grass.
Not a pretty sight, I agree.
Are you going to lock into your forever home mortgage with your forever husband?
Sam? He's not actually my forever husband. I might even get rid of him soon. I've created a list of pros and cons.
Any highlights?
Pros or cons?
Both.
Okay, pros. Is tidy, which is rare. Goes down on me, also rare. Has straight teeth, not sure if that is rare. Cons, you name it, he's doing it.
Leaves the toilet seat up?
Yep,
Not squeezing the toothpaste from the end?
I do that.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay. Leaving greasy burger bags on the passenger seat of his car?
every day.
Hooked on his ex?
Yep,
Okay, I see. So who's going to be your forever husband then?
he should arrive pretty soon. My eggs aren't as sprightly as they used to be.
Are they your forever eggs?
Yes, I'm going to use these ones for sure. Not the ones I put on ice. I'll give those ones to an infertile friend.
Any chance you might not be able to conceive?
None.
Is that your forever dog I hear barking in the garden?
What, her? No, my forever dog died. That one's my who wants a dog dog.
What was it like having a forever dog?
Really nice.
What about your career?
My career's for keeps.
So if I have this right, you're still waiting for your forever house and your forever husband. Your eggs are good to go. Your career is getting my tick of approval, and your current dog will have to do because your forever dog died before forever came, right?
That sounds right.
So in terms of our friendship then, are we going for temporary arrangement or will this be something permanent?
What were you thinking?
Well, I've been thinking that either way, we might as well lock in for the next year or so. We need to be colleagues for that long at least, if not longer. So we might as well just pencil it in. Let's say a 2-year friendship. After that, we could play it by ear.
That sounds great. Completely in alignment with my life schedule. Will we be the everyday check-in kind or the once a week deep connectivity type? Or should we aim for a monthly hike? That might involve getting our periods at the same time. I'll have to check with my GP to make sure that's okay with him.
I'm leaning toward the monthly hike, plus the odd phone chat, perhaps to talk about the more difficult aspects of existence, like mental illness, chronic illness, sibling fights, whether or not to put our parents into homes, those sort of things.
I'm leaning that way too. I like the idea of eliminating the pleasantries. Does that sound good to you?
No pleasantries at all?
Well, we'd say hi, of course, and maybe we could throw in a how are you and a nice to talk to you at the end. But beyond that, we're just cutting into precious gym time.
Oh, what gym do you go to?
Easy Fit.
Nice. I like that gym. I wanted it to be my forever gym.
Really? That's so weird because it's mine now. Where are you working out now?
Nowhere.
Nowhere at all?
I do a lot of sitting around watching TV with a family-sized bag of kettle chips.
What flavor?
Dill pickle.
Oh, I way prefer salt and vinegar.
Is that your forever preference?
For sure. I consolidated that flavor, what will it be now? 4 years ago?
For you. I've been on the fence about committing to dill pickle. Feels a little early.
On a more serious note, have you really stopped going to the gym?
Yeah, it wasn't my thing in the end. I play ping pong in my basement with my neighbor though.
Not to be rude or anything, but I may have to give this friendship a little more thought.
What? Because I'm not buff enough?
I'm not buff, but that's not the reason. I was looking for a healthier person to be friends with. Ping pong doesn't quite cut it in terms of cardiovascular exercise. I may need to pull back, reconsider.
Might be a good thing.
Why?
Well, I'm already in my forever home. I have half the mortgage paid off already. You'd have a hard time keeping up to that. And by the time you got settled into your global warming-free home, I'd be well on my way to being reno-free. It wouldn't leave us much to talk about.
True. Do you want to just call it quits? We've both got plenty of other potential friends on our lists.
Yeah, might as well.
The two women do full circles, one to the left and one to the right. You watch them swerve to avoid the real estate agents and talking couples. You know this routine. They return to the center of the room and resume their conversation.
Wasn't this supposed to be your forever home?
Thanks, Gary. Okay, thanks. Sorry to drag you into that, Carrie. Okay, so that's really, it's more like a play or just a dialogue. It's not, it's not, so I don't even know why I'm calling it a short story. So I'm going to read a few poems as well. This poem is a very short poem, and it's a found poem, so everything was found and just put onto the page. And this was, I don't even remember what the situation was, what I was reading, but it was the comments underneath a really bad, I don't know, British tabloid newspaper, awful article. It was awful. And these were the comments that came up below it. And it's called Small Talk. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, it seems to me. Why haven't they been arrested and taken to court? I'm sure if it had been the other way around, there would have been trouble. The girls probably haven't reported it, but they should. One law for them, one law for us. These guys are running the show. They are protected by the British Muslim police force, all caps. So true. The law works in their favor. We are second-class citizens in our own country, and we can all blame the government. You've heard this stuff before, right? It's awful. And I'm reading that before I read the second poem, which I wrote very recently, and it's called Capital, and it's based on what happened at the Capitol a few weeks back. And it's just all the images of the words kind of floating around in my head and just came out in this poem. Yeah, pretty awful images, really. Okay, so Capital. Capital calamity crowned king sins, calm in situ photograph, bestial flag wearing beard, humping statues and statuettes, sprawled kingpin paper illiterate across the bitch's desk, clatter of steps, police chest squeezed, crouched dark down the video shouts into the belly of the internet. That squeaked museum floor at combat, fur at attention, piss on symbols, paintings manhandled, displaced, Dalai Lama marijuana scroll, crotch men blue stained, dispossessed, carpet brass and metal detection, black bodies not here to be shot at, Confederate photograph flag, white boy attack. Quiet shuffle, holler, trouble, down under the hood of decency, decorum a crouch, a cower, booted glory, loud heat of breath on neck, Viking misery, handcuffs, sense, loud leather, helmet terror, flays the vault of the body politic. Kind of have to read that kind of loudly, hey? Okay, just got a few more poems here. This one I wrote, I don't know if Sharon Thiessen is here, but I wrote it at her house. Sharon does this, these workshops called Pinecone Workshops. And you basically spend the day at Sharon's house talking about writing, learning about writing, and eating really good food. And we were talking that day about Orpheus being ripped apart, and it was like one of the themes. I can't even remember why. I should remember why. And I wrote this poem. I started this poem at Sharon's house, and it's based on the Orpheus and Eurydice story, when Orpheus is bringing Eurydice back from the underworld, but he turns around and looks at her, and then he loses her because that's the condition, is that he will lose her if he turns around, which he does. And I love these Greek stories where it's just these impossible, I mean, they're so frustrating, right? These impossible moments of like, you just one tiny turn and she's gone. So yeah, this is my poem about that. Orpheus and Eurydice. We believe that Eurydice was there when Orpheus turned around, but perhaps she was merely a hologram, a miniature Princess Leia in white traveling robes. Perhaps she was Orpheus's own reflection, shot back at him from a sudden mirror, or a collection of heat waves spinning off a modern-day fiery hell road, or a body undulating like water, or the belly of a dancer. Maybe Hades commanded her to call out the name of her husband over and over like a taunt at a school gate, or maybe he ordered her to call out only once, just loud enough to get Orpheus to turn around. Maybe Orpheus never even turned around at all, but Hades lied and said he did, or Eurydice lied and said he did, because she preferred it in hell, or Orpheus lied because he was a romantic sort of guy and liked a good story. Maybe he didn't want her back, and so he turned around in order to lose her again. Who was there to witness Orpheus's turn? At which of the slow, quiet switchbacks that carried them both from the deep stood this witness? How quickly did Eurydice walk? Did sticks crack under her feet? Did he turn because he thought an animal was about to pounce him? Did a mountain lion appear at the opening to the underworld so Orpheus couldn't help but look back to warn his wife of the danger? Of all the possibilities, the worst is that Orpheus simply forgot Hades' command. Perhaps Eurydice taunted him cruelly. Perhaps she walked behind, mocking him for the size of his ass, the bow of his legs, his larger-than-before bald patch, a bullseye for her shrieks and taunts. Did she throw things at him? A handful of leaves, small stones, bigger stones? Did she sing a Christmas hit, one that Orpheus hated over and over again? Did she list the names of the men she had fucked before him? Did she blow badly into a trumpet? Maybe she was always that kind of a person. Maybe she preferred it with Hades. He probably had a sense of humor and liked playing poker as much as she did. Or maybe she was just putting one foot ahead of the other, being smart, being safe, so she wouldn't have to stay in hell. But then Orpheus fucked it up. But what we want to believe is that Eurydice loved Orpheus, and that Orpheus loved Eurydice, and that he turned because he loved her and wanted so badly to see her. What we want to believe is that he just couldn't wait. Maybe the love inside him was cracking him open, so when she called his name, she couldn't help it. His hinges opened just like that and swung his body around, whiplashed him back to her. We suspect he was so taken by the scent of flowers, nightstock, jasmine, orange blossom, all the blooming flowers from all the seasons and all the climates on earth pulsing out thickly into the night air, that he simply didn't believe Hades' warning and turned, as you would, towards the lover. And maybe neither of them cared when they got separated a second time, because they both knew that the inevitability of his turn was proof of everything. Okay, I've got two more poems to read. I think that is okay. Is that okay? Can I check with Clay? That's okay.
That's lovely.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
lovely.
Both of these poems are about my dad. My dad died in 2019 in the summer, And this poem was written on his birthday, which is January 31st of the year that he died. And I was at work that day, and I was working in Salmon and I was teaching a narrative class. And I just had the idea that I was going to talk to my students about my office, the view from my office window, which was very boring. It was really incredibly boring. It was like a couple of flags outside and a bare tree, and it was, you know, a very ugly view. And I wanted to talk to them about how in narrative, especially in film and in fiction, there are all these moments that are so exciting, but in the day-to-day, we have these moments that are quite boring, and those moments don't usually end up in narrative. And that was going to be what I talked about. But it didn't quite work out that way. Okay, birthday robins. To explain narrative to my students, I plan to discuss the view from my office. 2 flags, moving today because it's windy. My view of a square of the world, the looking that we do, the quiet, steady looking and thinking that makes up pieces out of the puzzle that constitutes a day, a week, a year, a life. These moments are rarely shifted on screen or into books because they are not thrilling. I want to tell them that my father is dying and today is the last happy birthday I will wish him. I send him my words in a brief email while I sipped my morning tea, as if I were canceling a dentist appointment or letting a student know which page to read up to. But we have run out of time and the students have classes to get to. We will continue on Tuesday, I say. I've been fearing this day for weeks. Death and birth in numbers, the radical perplexity of these patterns. Thomas Hardy's death day that passes unannounced until the trumpets come out and you are being taken out of the house in a box. This is a work day, a Thursday. I pass by Patty's office, hear her laugh. I smell the breath of the photocopy room. These moments are like worms tilling the soil unthanked. We do not try to notice them. These moments do not belong to epiphanies or climaxes. They belong nowhere. In the dark office comes the sound of my key in the lock, an interruption, light. And in this thinking, returning to my office, having run out of time to explain the bit about my office window and the mundanity of the view, I see a trio of robins in the branches of the tree outside. Now 4, 5, 4 again, 3. I sit and watch them for a while, take in the fact my life has suddenly become a movie. The window makes compositions for me. The flags flutter inside the frame, something I intended to be sure with the wind of my mind. I am thankful that I didn't use the view from my office as an example of the plainness of moments. This moment will never be forgotten. The tree outside my window is on fire with the coming and going of robins. And now there are 2 more. Are these my father's robins? Is this a birthday party? A quiet middle-aged one in the cave-like dark of an Italian restaurant. A friend coming in from a rainy street, looking for somewhere to place her umbrella before embracing my father and placing her gift by the leg of her chair. For later, she says. No. Open it, Dad. Open it. That's hard to read. Yeah. Okay. This last poem, I actually want to show you a video, and I think that thanks, Kim. I think that Natasha can show it to you, and I think you have to just watch the link. No. Okay. So this is a video of that my dad sent me, and this was from his hospice. So it's a poem about this, kind of about this. Thank you. There's no sound. Is there any sound for that or no? No. Okay, so that when the seagull hits the window, it's really loud. Like it's like bang, bang. It's so loud. Oh, you can hear it this time? No. There you go. So thank you. Thank you. I wanted to, that's what I was thinking about when I was writing this last poem I'm going to read to you. So my dad sent that to me, and birds and death are very associated. My maternal grandfather, when he died, a bluebird came to his window, and my aunt, who works with seniors, was mad at herself because she said she should have known when he said that he was getting close. And so this seagull came a few times to my dad, but I received this video 2 days before he died. Okay, and the word morning, I use it twice here, and it's the morning with the U, not the time of day. 2 dreams. One before the yipping of coyotes in the clay gulch that runs alongside the Pottery Road. The other after I stopped craning my ear to the coyotes and fell back to sleep. My main question before falling back to sleep had been, is this morning? I also couldn't help but wonder if people copied coyotes or if coyotes copied people, for there was something eerily familiar about their cries. This was surely language. Also, it was music. Excuse me. In the first dream, the name Delaware shivered its pennant through my head. The Delaware Pavilion at Bexhill-on-Sea, where I sat with my father in Maryland and drank orange San Pellegrino, is named after someone who came from a war. He came from a war, and now there is a pavilion and a gift shop and a cafe, this one, in his honor. He came from a war stained with blood, his own and other people's. In an email, Curtis asked if I'd had any visitation dreams. I hadn't. This was my first, but it was little more than a name, Delaware, a place, Bexhill-on-Sea. These were of my father, but they were not him. The second dream caught me off guard because I thought I was still awake, worrying over those coyotes who were coming closer. In the dream, I am in another tourist attraction, this time in Southwark, the neighborhood of my father's father, Bill. I'm coming out of the front doors of the Imperial War Museum. The facade is important. It is part of me, my wings, my protection. As I descend the steps of the entrance, 40 or so birds erupt from the roof of the museum. They are neither exotic nor colorful. The flock is made up of seagulls, crows, starlings, perhaps something bigger like an albatross, perhaps something smaller like a sparrow or a thrush. Mostly, they are mid-sized birds. And then I remember Stephen, a seagull who in my father's last days alive came and pecked aggressively, impatiently, twice on the glass patio door that led from my father's room to the beautiful quiet grounds of the hospice. Every day he came, peck, peck, so loud I couldn't quite believe it when I viewed the video that my father sent me, and how in the days that followed my father's death, it was Stephen I kept returning to, a character in my first novel who played the good father. Now, a seagull called by a morning coyote to the spaces we tourists of the family landscape have frequented, the space of our short visits to museums and castle tea shops where we throw bits of cake to the sparrows. In your last years, we took our visits on the coast with our sunglasses on and the wind whipping our hair in our eyes. But it was there in Southwark with Bill that I found you pecking at the thick glass door of my dream for me to let you in. Thank you, everybody. Strange.
Feel free to unmute and applaud. Thank you, Hannah.
I can read the comments now. Put my glasses on now. see you all. Thanks. I'm going to turn my mic off, okay?
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. We turn now to Michael V. Smith. Michael V. Smith is a Canadian novelist, poet, and filmmaker. Originally from Cornwall, Ontario, he now makes Kelowna, British Columbia, home. His debut novel, Cumberland, was nominated for the Books in Canada First Novel Award in 2002. He has also been a nominee for the Journey Prize and was inaugural winner of the Dane Ogilvy Prize. Smith's books include Bad Ideas, a 2017 collection of poems from Nightwood Editions, and the memoir My Body Is Yours from Arsenal Pulp Press in 2015. His films include the 2019 National Film Board short documentary, The Hookup, about gay men from different generations. As a drag artist and clown, he has presented at many cabarets and festivals, including Vancouver Fringe Fest, the Vancouver Comedy Festival, and internationally in the Netherlands and Germany. He teaches in the Creative Studies Department of UBC's Okanagan campus. Feel free to unmute and please join me in welcoming Michael V. Smith.
Yay. Hi, everybody. Well, I want to thank Natasha and Julia and everybody at Oxygen for inviting me here, hosting me, and Tom, I think, had a hand in this reading series, Tom Wayman, and Clay, who is just always a delight. And I'm really thrilled to be invited to perform with Hannah, who is always amazing and thrills me. My heart squeezed really hard a couple times. And so the first poem I'm going to read, I didn't plan on reading it, but Hannah read about her dad sending the last message, and I have a poem about my dad sending me his last message. So I'm going to try to get through the poem. And this is a verbatim poem, or it's a found poem, I guess. All I did was take the postings about my father in the year prior to his death, all the postings I had on Facebook. So the poem's called My Father Died on Facebook, Selected Status Updates. Last minute one-way ticket to Ontario. I might be slow to respond for a while. Overheard Dad talking to palliative care today. I don't want to die. I can't say why I don't want to die. I just don't. Packing up Dad's apartment. Yesterday he seemed clear and sharp. Then he told me he was moving into my sister's unfinished basement. They would put in a lift. He's grasping at make-believe straws. If you're the praying type, pray he might find some peace. I don't recommend packing up your father's apartment all by your lonesome. No siree. I feel like I'm broadcasting a pity party, but really, I'm okay. Thank you, therapy. My bounce back father is getting stronger again. I'm walking in a dream of another man's life. Everything is familiar, but different. I've been away too long. Nothing's changed but me. Shame on whomever stole my hospitalized father's cash and Tim Horton cards for Father's Day yesterday. I hope you gag on that coffee. I would like to request a day without struggle. The problem with a big heart is that it's just so damn heavy. Sometimes I think Facebook is my whiny place. This is a week of uncommon stresses, common ones too. My tenure package is due and my father is losing his leg. He's a high risk in surgery. My father is living a horror story. Texting Dad about the surgery he might not survive. Life can be very small and very big all at once. Dad's full care team meets today to discuss his options. So today we look at what are best strategies, what is in store with a man whose foot is rotting black. Flying to Ottawa for Dad's amputation. After Dad's decision, the doctor walked into the room and Dad asked him, You got your knife sharp? Dad made it through surgery, and he's still high risk in ICU, but we're getting closer. I'm glad I'm here. This is superlatively intense. There are no words for the pain he has. I'm freaked out and so behind on work. I need everything to stop moving for a while. My father has a stump and bouts of terrifying pain. How does one do anything? Dad tried mango today for the first time. He said, I don't know what it is. Is it a fruit or a vegetable or what? I showed him a photo on Google. He's feeling better. It's like visiting from Mars. I don't usually post about hard times because it feels wanky, but I'm practicing being more emotionally present and less disembodied. I would like to report I need more in-person hugs. My father is much more stable, although he has a rough journey ahead with only one leg. My father's infection is all gone. He's been in the wheelchair twice this week, just days after surgery. He's my hero. Pneumonia, just to make his life a soap opera. Holding my breath, thinking of my too tired sister, trying to mark essays. I'm living a blessed life. You know it's been a damn hard year, but the love of friends has bolstered me. I don't want to live 2012 again, but I wouldn't take it back either. I want the riches that this year has taught me. My father texted me the other day, are you still upset about the Twinkie plant closing? I think the smartass is feeling better. The last message from my father was about Twinkies. He passed away without pain last night. Ernest Alexander Michael Smith, August 7th, 1949 to November 28th, 2013. For those asking, my father will have a service at St. Peter's Church on East 2nd Street, Wednesday, December 5th at 11 a.m. No flowers, please, though a donation to a charity of your choice is always a kindness paid forward. I'm a bit emotionally barren with some singing and dancing thrown in. I'm doing great, although unmotivated. Eulogy written, photoshopped, doesn't seem real, but we collect the ashes today. That'll move us forward, I suspect. Sounds like I could make money writing eulogies. I've been wearing my father's gold chain and cross, which make it more obvious to me that he's dead. What I find most troubling is trying to reconcile the notion of the vastness of the universe, the seemingly infinite, with death as finite, as never again. And I think, of course we have gods to resolve this contradiction. Well, I promise you they're not all going to be about loved ones dying. Anyways, I've never read that poem before, so thanks, Hannah, for the prompt. That was great. Echoes, I like echoes in poetry. I once did a tour with Elizabeth Paczynski and Jenica Harper, who were two Vancouver poets, and the three of us did round robins where we would just start with any old poem, one of us, and then we do responses. So I'd read like Hannah did. Hannah read a poem about her dad's last text, and I'm like, oh, I got a poem about my dad's last text. And then something from my poem sparks the next poem, and sometimes it's a theme and it's a love poem. Sometimes it's an item like a text. And that was really fun. I love those. This is from my book called Bad Ideas. This is a poem called Prayer for Irony. And I'm also reading it because Hannah had talked about the attack on the Capitol. And I changed this poem the day after President Trump got elected. His name appears in the last line of the poem. And now he's no longer the president. And so it's very apt, as you'll see. This is Prayer for Irony. After his wife left him for a juggler, they met in the supermarket, a tall, reedy man with fingers too fine for his short, plump torso. The artist did what he'd always wanted and bought a young terrier at the pound. He named it Irony, a cleverness in the face of grief, because wasn't it he that suggested they invite his future cuckold, the jug, for coffee? Around the house, the dog pissed everywhere paper hadn't been laid, making damp the hall closet, the sofa, and bed. Irony was a model pup when the artist was free and the holiest hell at deadlines. If the man had baggies, The shit was diuretic. Each evening, the artist cried, the puppy padded across the room and slept. When, after weeks of being single, the artist said yes to an invitation to picnic in the park with that intern who held the elevator on occasion just for him, of course he brought Irony, who vomited grass on the girl's light blue Mary Janes. Finally, the artist thought himself savvy to rename the beast Happy. All day, the terrier bawled for the moon in his small, convincing yowl, until the sun rose on the 7th day, and the man tried again with Lucky. By noon, a transport had flattened fur to grill, the nimble way a round, dull period at the end of a sentence can render a trumped-up thought finite. So I didn't have trumped up in there, but I really like the trumped up thought being finite. There's finite in the last poem too, isn't there? I didn't even notice that. Okay, so I'm gonna read some, I tweeted out and shared on a few social media platforms I was gonna read a new long poem, but then I read my new long poem and I don't think it's ready for public consumption, certainly not for the discerning tastes of Nelson and other places on the internet. So I thought I would read things that I don't normally read, though the last poem I often read, but I'm picking it for Hannah's sake. So this is from my book, What You Can't Have. It's my first book. I don't read from that much anymore, and I just thought I'd do something fresh with something old. Fresh with not fresh. So this is called Pleasure. And this is a true story from that a friend told me. Pleasure. At the open refrigerator, pooling cool air around their ankles, uninvited in the neighbor's kitchen, 2 boys pick cherries from a white bowl. They begin eating 2 or 3, but fast grow excited by the sweet taste of getting up to no good, until one red globe remains at the bottom of the bowl, a dark reminder in an otherwise clean conscience. The kids pause, surprised witnesses at their own accident. As one reaches for the last juicy bite, his friend catches him by the wrist. "We can't eat them all," he says. "But we did," the first replies, believing the world that obvious. "I am guilty or I'm not, hungry or not, the bowl empty or not quite, which doesn't matter when you need to give your mother a red-handed explanation." "Okay, we'll leave the last one," he adds, as he plucks the cherry from the bowl and holds the flesh at his friend's ruby lips. And then this is a poem. Am I going to read this one? Sure. This is another death poem, so forgive me, but it's one of my favorites. This is called Deliverance. After breaking her hip into halves on the landing, my grandmother lounged for 3 days to convince us the couch was all she needed to return to normal. 4 months later, she chose to hide pneumonia in her bed, determined she needed neither care, nor water, nor food to be saved. Even on the brightest days, she stood at the door waving hello or goodbye, unwilling to step outside. Either the everyday fear held her to the couch, or some other regret about to happen, her death in a sterile ward. But only when 2 officers threatened to take her to the hospital in their cruiser did she permit my uncle the injustice of carrying her to his car. He leaned over his mother, who smelled even more like herself, sweat, smoke, powder, beer, slid one arm beneath her back, the other under her knees, and lifted so slowly, so lightly, you might have thought he could bear just the best parts and leave the broken ones behind. And then the last poem in the book was written for Matt Rader, who's a Canadian poet, his daughter Neela, who's 15 now. And this poem's called Childproofing, and it's for her birth. What could we undo? Say we take away famine. Boys bleeding in the streets, the bullets fly back into their guns. If we could refasten the cells of skin and cartilage that make the tender wound, each of us furled into the wombs of our mothers and our mothers drawn back, and then again, generations unborn to quiet the hungry belly. What would we have to offer when the tape was all rewound? There is no sun without its shadow, no living without consequence. Let us make the future so unlike its past, we can forget the names of tragic things. Neela, 3 weeks new and not a stitch of language. You're this, our science fiction. Your tongue too light for words, 2 hands smaller than the Martian bugs of Mexico. And so I'm going to switch. Whoops, sorry, I touched my microphone. I'm so unprofessional. I'm going to switch to my other book, Bad Ideas, and I've picked some poems that I don't read that often. This is called Prayer for Paternal Love, which has a dark turn compared to the poem about my father's death, but whatever. You know, not all poems are about ourselves. Some poems are about other selves. Prayer for Paternal Love. All 8 fingers on his right hand refuse to be a blessing, so that even at the dinner table, he cannot pinch salt from the crowding of his digits. Days after he was born, only dogs, his father said, could ignore them. 8 splayed fingers on the backyard stump, knuckles around the wrist. Hold still, his dad says. The boy prays the octopus of his hand contains a secret, buoyancy, like silt that can storm, then settle, given time. He has loved his father less than either of them would wish. Now give it here, his father says, and the boy, to prove the point, reaches for their axe. And this is a poem from when I lived in Vancouver. It's called Prayer for Promiscuity. And I know my friend Kim Kinnikin is in the audience. And so I'm going to send this poem out to him because, you know, promiscuity is what we shared in our 20s. Prayer for Promiscuity. I think I'm blushing a little. Okay, Prayer for Promiscuity. Midnight in Stanley Park, the moon is an ally. Night breathes a chill into furs. Men double as tree trunks, appear a darker dark. Within, your ears are readied eyes, sift animal sounds from human, some differences of intent. The dark will always see better, as though it hides our lovers like the dead, dead before we met. The night teaches us to miss what we never had. Across Lost Lagoon, the apartment complexes rise, pixelated, a horizon lonelier than childhood. If we'd been children together, perhaps we could have saved each other. When they lift from the shadows of trees, what do your palms reach for? Have you noticed your fingertips, bark peppering the skin? I could lick them clean as silence if they rested here and here a while. And I have, this is my last poem. This is from a new collection. It's the only poem in the collection so far. I have drafts of other things, but this is the only thing I finished. And it's called Pretending Sleep. Once my grandparents drove home to their bungalow on Rideau Street, Kemptville, Ontario, with crickets scissoring their legs at every stop sign the Nova met. Wind whistling to a tune my grandmother pulled, fresh from the air the dark delivered to the curve of her tongue. I would fain sleep, for the feeling of my grandfather's arms collecting my body from the dog-haired back seat. The warmth of his torso matched mine, his evening stubble, one hand beneath my butt and the other along my back, the pretend of my eyelids lightly shut, the crunch of gravel, 5 paces along cement tiles to the wooden deck, 3 steps up and 2 more to the door, propped open by my grandmother. No lights in the house, whispers about where they'll put me. Am I still asleep? Do they bother with pajamas? Here, leave his shoes by the door. Lit by the dark, the deep smell of leftover ground beef and onions in a cast iron pan, boiled icing and vanilla cake. He sails me in the ship of his arms through the kitchen, the dining room, down the narrow hall, past the large wooden coat rack and the front door sealed in old plastic. We climb the oak stairs for too long to be believed. The sweetness of that time between floors made more so by the dread of the last 4 paces which deliver me to the spare bed. My body cold everywhere my grandfather no longer is, like a wisdom the body knows of what the future does and doesn't hold. Thanks, everybody.
Wow, that was awesome.
I got a little choked up.
Yeah, really good.
Ooh.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Yes, please join me in applause for both our performers this evening, Hannah Calder and Michael Beeson. Now we come to the much vaunted discussion portion of the evening. I will turn this complex operation over to Natasha in the sound booth.
Okay, everyone. The way we're going to do this, some of you who were at the last author reading evening will remember, is that I'd like you to type your name into the chat box if you would like to ask a question. And if you could also add whether it's who it's for or whether it's for both, that would be great. And then once I see the first names, I'll tell you to unmute and then you can ask your question, okay? Do we have any? Just looking.
I think perhaps I could ask a question, not to jump the shark or the line, but I see no one's really thrown down here. So perhaps this could get the ball rolling. We see some consistencies over the arc of tonight's performances, contending with the mortality of one's parents. And this has to be a massive challenge for a writer to contend with. I note that Tom Wayman is in the audience tonight, and his collection, My Father's Cup, and the poem of the same title also contends with the same subject matter. So I put the question to both of tonight's performers. Is there something less excruciating to contend with?
Yes. That's my answer.
It's funny.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
I don't, my father's death was really terrible for me because he died in pieces. I was actually thinking about it today. It took me a long time to delete his last texts, and I still have his birthday in my calendar, even though I'm not going to forget what day his birthday is. But you know, you slowly move, and things you've inherited break, and you have to throw them out. And so I feel like I'm still losing parts of my father, and he died in such an awful way. He was so sick and just sad. Writing the poem is actually healing and such a blessing, because it gives me a place to put the complexity of that emotion. I think that's what poetry does for us. It helps us hold contradictory ideas and a complexity, things we can't wrestle with. The poem wrestles it for us in its space, you know, the spaces between its lines and images. It's sort of like I've been watching a lot of Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, and they trap bad demons in little boxes sometimes. And the poem's kind of like that. It traps a little demon in its box. And so poetry always feels like a gift, even if the subject matter is hard, the poem is a balm. The poem is soothing for me as a writer. What about you, Hannah? I love this question, Clay.
Yeah, I do too. And you basically captured it perfectly there, Michael. And I feel that when I write poetry about my emotions or things that are going on, like something as big as your father dying, it's like almost taking a photograph, or you're capturing those emotions where they are at the time that you feel them, because a year later, 2 years later, you won't remember what that feeling was. And so every time I go back to the poem, I'm like, that's how I felt. That was what that was like. And it's like you're capturing that memory. And it's very precious when it's about a loved one. And I've read many poems about people's parents dying, and I think it's something that all poets end up, you know, maybe, well, yeah, I don't know, maybe not, like if they die before their parents, but if they don't, then it's something that they write about, right? For good reason, I think.
Thank you. I've got a question from Kerry for both of you. So I'm going to...
First of all, I want to say I love seeing your faces. I was not expecting so many tears tonight. Thank you very much from both of you. My question for both of you is, this last year has inevitably changed us. And I'm wondering how it's changed you and how it's changed your writing.
An awesome question, Carrie. I was thinking about that today, strangely enough. I think it's allowed me to get back to my writing as I, in the way that the relationship I had with my writing when I was younger, when I was in my early 20s or even my teens, because I'm not worrying about the end result. I'm not worrying about publishing. I'm not worrying about even readings. I mean, they're rare now, right? So like, I'm just not worrying about audience. I'm thinking about writing, and it's because of, you know, this COVID world we're in, where we're kind of having to be more insular and go back. Like I've gone back to my diary, and there's something really exciting about this for me as a writer, because I feel like I'd gotten lost over the last few years, and it's just, you know, just recently that I felt like I'm back with my writing. So yeah, that was a great question. Michael, what about you? Where are you at?
Well, yeah, this has been an interesting year. Two big things sort of happened for me. When we first shut down last March, I just thought, okay, if we're all going to be trapped at home, I want to do something. And I'd had an idea prior, and so I did it. I did every night at 7 o'clock, I told a story. And when I ran out of stories, I invited friends on the show to tell a story, and I broadcast live on YouTube. So I did a live YouTube channel. You could look up some of the stories if you want. And they're really just me telling you stories, like the stories that are in my poems. It's just like, here's when someone broke a leg, or here's when we smashed the car, and here's this great story about my best friend who's kind of wild. And those are the kinds of stories people told when they came on the show too. So that was new. I'd never done anything like that before. And the long poems I'm working on are actually transcriptions of those stories. I thought I wanted to put them on paper and see what they looked like. And I really like them, but they sound more like, they look like poems, but they sound like stories. Anyways, and something about that's really interesting. So that's exciting that all of that is new. But I think the most significant thing that's changed for me is as this has progressed and it became more and more obvious, we were in it for the long haul. I really took stock of the fact that I needed to take good care of myself, so that, because I teach at the university and it's a full-time and very demanding job, and I wanted to be there for my students. So I wanted to lead with wellness. And that meant I needed to take care of my own wellness. And I prioritized, I've been having lots of problems with my back, and I'm going for an MRI on Friday. And you're the first to know. Don't tell my mom. I told my mom, I'm kidding. But I'm having lots of problems with pain. And so I really needed to prioritize my own wellness. And that made me rethink all of my teaching. And it also made me rethink what I needed to have capacity to teach better. And that was a regular writing practice. Because usually I teach during the Christmas, or I write during the Christmas break and over the summer when I'm not teaching. And when I teach in those 2 sets of 13 weeks plus prep on either and marking on either side, I don't do any writing hardly at all. So I started writing every Thursday morning once a week and just picking away at stuff. And I've started also reading books that I want to read, not just books I need to read for school. And the miraculous thing is, you would think because I'm taking time out of my week to do other things I don't normally do, you'd think that I would have less time. And I actually find I had more last semester. Maybe not quite this term, but this term that's for different reasons. But I found room in there, I think, because I was feeding myself. I was feeding my psyche and my spirit and my creativity. And because I was feeding and nurturing myself creatively, I had more capacity to do my job better. I had an outlet and I had a place to manage, and I was prioritizing my own body and health, and that also gave me more capacity. So it was kind of amazing that they say this, right? You hear this all the time. You're supposed to put your own health first, but we don't. We always finish the thing that needs to be finished on the deadline and then put our backs out of stress because we prioritize other people. Well, I always do. And by switching that, it's amazing how inverting it has just made everything so much easier, because I'm finally prioritizing my own body, which is amazing.
Can I just say something, Michael?
Yeah.
What you're saying is exactly what's happening for me right now too. And I'm writing every day, and I'm writing right in the middle of the day from 1 until 2. And even if I have a ton of prep to do, or students, I say, no, I'm going to write. And it's incredible. Like, by putting it in the middle of the day and saying, this is my priority, it's actually happening. And I'm doing it every weekday anyway. This 1 hour, it's my writing hour. And I feel like this is because of COVID and like really prioritizing my health, right? Like you're saying, and I think it's great. I mean, I don't know if this is happening for other people. It's only new for me. This is like really since Christmas, but it's exciting. So it's really cool that you're having a similar experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive, where at least we get so much. It's capitalism, isn't it? There's so much external pressure to perform, produce. But I actually am a better producer if I'm nurturing myself. The capitalism would do better if it said nurture. Then we wouldn't have a problem.
Yeah.
Well, we'd have a few other problems, but you know what I mean.
Totally.
I do have another question. It's from Blair. So Blair, if you could unmute, I'm going to add you there. And he's got a message, he's got a question, sorry, for both of you. So I'm just going to bring you back.
Am I good?
You are good.
Okay. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Amazing, both of you. It was fantastic. I just had a question. You're both published authors, both have published books. I was just wondering if maybe you could each speak a little bit about your first experience with publishing, or what you got, maybe more on the poetry side of things, what you had published first and where, and what that experience was like. That's it.
You want to go, Michael?
No, Beauty Before Age.
Okay. So Blair, are you just talking about anything, publishing anything at all?
Yeah.
So I think, and I should know this, I think the first thing I published was in The Lyre at Capilano College. So I was a student, like Blair was in my class last semester, so he's a creative writing student. And the students at the college put out this magazine, this journal of student writing. And I think that was the first place I published a poem. And it was very exciting to see something I'd written in print. And we did a reading in relation to that. And then after that, it was student publications for a while, actually, before I moved on from that. So that's a good way to start, I think. Michael?
Yeah, my first publication was in a literary insert that was in a gay magazine in Toronto, the Church Wellesley Review, and they did once a year they published gay writers. So I had a poem published in there, and it got distributed around the city. It was one of those sort of public newspapers that get distributed everywhere. And I remember running around the city sort of screaming to anybody who would listen that I'd got a poem published. And by coincidence, I was going to my favorite bookstore, Writers and Company, up at St. Clair and wherever. And I walked into that store and I bought a book, and I went up so I could go up to the counter and I said, I got a poem published today, my first poem ever. I was like, you know, this little geeky kid. And I was so overjoyed by it. And I didn't have anything published for years after that, like maybe 2 years or 3 years. But I wrote that for a long time. It was a big deal to see my name in print. And, the first story I got published was a similar experience. I hadn't had any stories published before. I didn't get anything published after, but it was the first story I ever had published was actually in a book that Bonnie Bernard edited with Koto Press called Stagline. Is that right? Stagline. It's the ugliest book, hands down, you've ever seen. It's hideous. But she couldn't get a hold of me because I was a student and I moved 3 times from when I submitted my story to when it got accepted. And there wasn't Facebook or anything. I don't know how she ended up finding me, but she went through quite a circuitous route and got me on the phone and said, is this Michael Smith? And I'm like, yeah. Are you the one who wrote this story? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, I want to publish it and you're impossible to get a hold of. Yeah, anyways, that's the little story. I think I always tell my students that the best thing you can do is start sending stuff out right away. Even if you don't think it's not your decision to decide whether it's ready to get published or not. You can decide after an editor says they want to take it, whether you want to include it, but you should just get in the practice of sending stuff out as much as you can. So, because it took me years. And you don't want it to take, if it's going to take years, you may as well start now. It's the same reason why you write a novel. If you want to finish a novel that's going to take you 6 years to write, you should start today, because 6 years isn't going to come any sooner if you start tomorrow.
Well, thank you. Don't seeing any more questions in the chat. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to go back to Clay.
Great. Thank you, Natasha. Just let me get my camera up here. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for your attendance this evening. This has been a stellar event. I'm exhausted. I feel like I actually went out. I think that's always the sign of a great evening, that or tears. And I think the tears were there as well. So we're very fortunate. I want to thank you both for joining us this evening. It was a wonderful experience. We're very grateful. Mm-hmm. Maybe we could unmute one last time and put our hands together for Hannah Calder and Michael V. Smith. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.